All right, so it's only about 100 degrees out, and of course your car's AC system has decided to stop working. Fear none, because today I'm going to go over some of the common causes and fixes of your car's AC system not working, and also touch over some of the less common causes and fixes as well. Hey, how's it going, do-it-yourselfers? So over the past few weeks, I've been getting a lot of questions from my subscribers about problems with their AC system. So I decided to do this video and try to go over the most common problems that will cause you to not have a working AC system. Now, it's very simple as far as diagnosing problems with your AC system. In one group, we'll have causes and fixes for an AC compressor that does engage, yet you don't get cold air coming out of your air vents. The other group, which is going to be the most common problem, we're going to go over the reasons why your AC compressor clutch does not engage and cause you not to get cold air coming out of your air vents. Now, for those of you new to AC repair, there's a look at your AC compressor. There's your AC compressor clutch up there. There's your drive belt. And you can easily find your AC compressor by just following the two pipes that will be going to it. One of these pipes, the bigger one, is going to be your low pressure side. The smaller one is going to be your high pressure side. As far as how you can tell whether the AC compressor clutch is engaged or not, it's very simple. If the AC compressor clutch, which is that part on the outside of the pulley, is spinning with the pulley, that's your AC compressor clutch engaged. However, if that part is not spinning, or only the pulley is spinning when the car is running and your AC on, that means your AC compressor clutch has not engaged. As far as why your AC compressor clutch is not engaging, well, the most common reason by far is going to be low refrigerant inside your AC system. Now, this could be due to a large or a small leak, but also you got to keep in mind all AC systems leak a little bit of refrigerant all the time. So maybe your AC was working properly last summer, but this spring or summer you decide to turn it on and it's not blowing cold air now and AC compressor clutch is not engaged. Again, there's a good chance it has leaked. The refrigerant has leaked out below a certain threshold, whereas the AC pressure switches are not allowing for the AC compressor clutch to engage. So for example, here's a look at the high pressure switch on this AC system, which is going to be right down there, right that guy. Now this 92 Honda Prelude doesn't have a low pressure switch, but it has a thermostat that's going to be in the evaporator housing that's going to be inside the dash that I can't show you. But before we get sidetracked too much, basically these pressure switches will not engage your AC compressor clutch if the pressure is too low. If there's no pressure, that's because if there's a leak, you don't want your AC compressor sucking in air, contaminating the entire system, or maybe even damaging the AC compressor itself. Alright, so how do you know if you have enough refrigerant in your system or not? Well, you could get one of these. These are not that expensive at Harbor Freight. I think you can get them for less than 50 bucks, maybe 55 bucks with a coupon. And you hook these up to these ports, one on the low pressure side and this one for the high pressure side. And that'll get you your static pressure readings. Now, that's going to be the same pretty much on both sides if everything inside your AC system is working right, because the engine is not running, the compressor clutch is not engaged. It's not compressing the refrigerant, therefore the refrigerant will leak from the high pressure side into the low pressure side and it will stabilize. It'll be pretty close to equal on both sides. Now if you hook these gauges up and you have no reading, then obviously you're completely empty. You probably have a large leak, but more than often than not, you'll have some sort of a pressure inside the system, but which will indicate that you probably have a small leak. Now another good option for a DIYer would be to go to the auto parts store, maybe AutoZone or O'Reilly's or whatever, and get a can of refrigerant with a gauge on it. Then you hook that up to the low pressure side and then you'll get the reading. But also if you go to get one of these, do not get one with a leak sealer, but get one with a UV dye in it. Because the leak sealer over time will do more harm than good, generally speaking. But the UV dye, if you do end up having a leak, which is large enough where you keep having to add refrigerant, then it leaks out and you have to do it again and again, you want to find the leak obviously and fix it. So the UV dye will help greatly. Obviously UV dye, you put it in the system. There's dyes for everything. You can put a dye in inside your engine to find oil leaks, inside your cooling system to find coolant leaks, transmission, so on and so forth. And you get a UV light with some glasses, and then you go start looking around inside all over the AC system components and find your leak. I'll go over this common areas where you can have a leak inside your AC system in a little bit. But yeah, you get one of these with a gauge on it, with some UV dye, you start adding refrigerant, then your AC compressor clutch will probably engage. But what about if you keep adding refrigerant and the pressure is building up, but your AC compressor clutch is not engaging. Well, if that's the case, the most common cause for that will be your AC compressor clutch. The contact surface of it has probably worn out, and now you have too much space between the compressor clutch and the pulley. See this tiny space right in between the two? That needs to be within a certain threshold for the AC compressor clutch to engage. All right, so I just found this AC compressor. It might be easier to show you on this. May not be the best example as far as showing you the space between the AC compressor clutch and the pulley, but here it is anyway. So here's your AC compressor clutch. When this turns, the shaft inside the AC compressor will turn, compressing the refrigerant. But when the pulley is spinning alone, see this is not turning, therefore the shaft is not turning. Now this engages with this pulley when your car's computer will command this on. Therefore, this will engage with the pulley, turn the compressor shaft inside this compressor, and then your receiver system will start working. But again, if the space between the compressor clutch and the pulley, in this case, this space here gets too large, then the coil, which is in the back here it is from a different AC compressor. Here's your AC compressor clutch coil. This is basically resting on the back of the pulley. The compressor clutch is here attached through this bearing to the shaft inside your AC compressor. When this engages, this turns on, this becomes activated. The compressor clutch will engage this contact surface on the pulley, and then everything will start spinning together. But under normal circumstances, this pulley is basically freewheeling with the engine on, and the AC compressor clutch and this shaft is just standing still. All right, so how do you know whether the contact surface on your AC compressor clutch or the pulley is too worn and the space is too much for the AC compressor clutch to engage? Well, you can, with the car not running, obviously, you get some feeler gauges and you get in there, you look up the specs for that space inside your car's repair manual, you measure the space, see whether it's within spec or not. The other thing I've seen people do is they get a long, small wooden dowel with the engine running, your AC on. You extremely carefully get down there without the dowel touching any of these belts, and you tap the end of your AC compressor clutch. And then if the clearance between the AC compressor clutch and the pulley is the problem, that little tap will allow your AC compressor clutch to engage the pulley and therefore allow you to also diagnose the problem with your AC system. Then from there you can get the AC compressor clutch as a kit, which usually comes with the AC compressor clutch, the snap rings, and also the AC compressor coil. You put that on there and then you should have no problem, and then your AC system should start working again. Now there's going to be a lot of people that say if your compressor clutch is going out, that's usually an indicator that your AC compressor is on its way out too. But since in my opinion, the price difference between the AC compressor clutch kit and AC compressor replacement is so huge, you're much better off, especially if you're a DIYer, to simply just replace the AC compressor clutch with the coil and whatnot. And a lot of times that'll last years before the AC compressor goes out. So keep that in mind. All right, so next let's assume you've put refrigerant inside the AC system and your AC works fine for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, but then you're back to square one and it stops working. So if that's the case, you obviously have a leak. Now if you put UV dye in the system with the refrigerant, now you can put on the glasses, get the UV light and go around and try to find the leak. Now, before I get to the common areas where you should look for a leak, there's another way that you can try to find leaks even before you add any refrigerants to a system that's low on refrigerant. And that is to look for PAG oil residue all around the components of your AC system. Now, for those that don't know, PAG oil is it's the oil that's inside your AC system. It's there for lubrication, basically. And when you have a leak, let's say you have a leak inside, on part of your AC condenser, for example. Let's say you have a leak right there. That PAG oil over time will leak out with the refrigerant and create a dark oily residue all around the spot where you have the leak. And you can spot these easily. I mean, it will be easy to spot if that leak's been going on for a while. The same goes for all the other AC components. You can just go around, follow the AC lines, on this system with an expansion valve. We won't get into it much, but your AC system usually either has an expansion valve that's usually with your evaporator inside your dash, or has an orifice tube, and a receiver dryer with an expansion valve, or an accumulator with an orifice tube. But we'll forget that for now. But just basically follow the lines coming out of your AC compressor, and which will go to all the different components. They'll go to your AC condenser first. You know, the high pressure one will go to your AC condenser first. Then from there, we'll go to a receiver dryer, then to an expansion valve and stuff. And then you can look for this oil residue. But as far as the common areas where you can expect leaks, for starters, it's going to be from around the seal that's around your shaft for your AC compressor. That's a pretty common area for AC refrigerant to leak out. Now, this might not be easy to spot. You know, you can look around the AC compressor and not see the residue of the PAG oil. But, you know, just to know that's one area that you can expect to have a refrigerant leak. Also look around all the different connections. Each connection will have a seal, a rubber seal that's supposed to seal refrigerant. But a very common area where you can find leaks on the hoses is where this rubber hose on this setup goes into this aluminum pipe. This area right here, you can expect these areas. These are common leak areas. Also, the rubber hoses themselves, they can potentially leak. And of course, the same goes for the connections on your AC receiver dryer or your accumulator, depending on what setup you have on your car. Now, your evaporator can also have a leak, but your evaporator is gonna be usually very hard to get to check for leaks, either through by using UV dye and that UV light, or just trying to do a visual inspection, look for that PEG oil residue that I talked about. Now that's where you pretty much have to use a sniffer, one of those refrigerant leak detectors. This guy right here. Now these used to cost a lot of money, but these days you can find them for fairly reasonable price on Amazon. You basically, the way you use this, you turn it on, you go around all the different components, try to find leaks. Use this tip. Let's say you suspect a leak at the compressor, you go around the pulley with this, try to see whether you have a leak there or not. Again, your car doesn't have to be running, or your AC compressor clutch does not have to be engaged to use this to try to find leaks. Now, as far as the evaporator, well, you can try to use this through the vents, or another good way is to try to get underneath the car, find the rubber hose or the line where the condensation comes from the evaporator and leaks out. If you ever have your car's AC system running in a hot day and you look underneath your car, you see a puddle of water. That's the condensation from your evaporator. That usually comes out through a rubber hose. You get this, again, your car not running, your AC system not engaged. You get this through that hole, and then if you have a leak, a lot of times this can sniff it out. All right, so now let's say you have enough refrigerant inside your AC system and you're also positive, or you may even have replaced your AC compressor clutch, and you're sure that is not the problem. However, it's still not engaging. Now what? So if that's the case, then it's very likely you have an electrical problem preventing your AC compressor clutch to be commanded on. It could be a problem with your AC compressor clutch coil, maybe a fuse, a relay, one of the pressure switches. My experience, the pressure switches are usually not the problem. The problem is usually somewhere else, or it could be the HVAC controls of your car or the ECU. The list can go on. Now, these are going to be hard to diagnose in this video. They require a video for themselves, which would probably have to be 20 minutes long. Now, I've done a video on electrical diagnosis of your AC system. I'll put a link to it at the end of this video or in the description box if you're interested in going that route. But now let's say your AC compressor clutch does engage and you have enough refrigerant in the system for it to engage. And now you also have one of these gauges, these gauge sets, and you have some readings now, but you don't know what the readings should be. Now, I don't mean to disappoint, but I do have to point out that the readings you would expect, good readings that you would expect to see on these gauges, are going to be different depending on your car's year and make and model, but also different depending on the outside temperature and humidity. Now, you can look this up, hopefully, on your car's repair manual, but here on the screen, I'll give you a chart that's going to show you a very general idea of what good readings should look like on an AC system. Now, the most accurate and safest way to make sure you have the exact amount of refrigerant inside your AC system would be to recover all the refrigerant from the system, then add the exact amount according to manufacturer's specifications back into the system. That way you're sure you're not putting too much refrigerant in the system, not potentially damaging something, or too little refrigerant in the system. Now, here's a trick that not a whole lot of people know about, and that is, let's say you don't have one of these gauges, but you have refrigerant in the system and your AC compressor clutch does engage. Well, how can you try to diagnose problems inside your AC system? Well, it's going to be a little tricky, but you can do it. So you go to your AC compressor, you find your high pressure line. That's going to be the smaller line, and on this setup is going to be this line down there, that's the high pressure line. And then preferably you want to get an infrared thermometer and measure the temperature. Or if you don't have one of those, you could wear some gloves and then try to touch that line. Now be very, very careful. That line, if your AC compressor is compressing the refrigerant, it's going to build up a lot of heat. That line is going to be really, really hot. If you grab it, you're sure to burn your hand. So just keep that in mind. You want to wear some gloves and have some water or on your hand or nearby just in case. And you just want to touch it a little bit. You'll feel it if the AC compressor is working correctly and compressing the refrigerant. That will be really hot. And then you follow that from there. It will go to your AC condenser. And the condenser, if your fans are working right, it condenses the refrigerant and it turns into liquid form from there. And it cools down and therefore it turns into liquid. But then it comes out again. It's still in the high pressure side. And I believe it's going to be, where is it? This line right here. This comes from your AC condenser. By the way, that's a sight glass. Modern car AC systems don't have this anymore. But anyway, this comes from your AC condenser and you can touch that. And that should be, cooler. It's still going to be warm, but cooler than when it comes out of your AC compressor. Because it goes through your condenser, it condenses, uses the fans, and it's a little bit cooler and turns into liquid. And if that's the case, then you're sure that your AC condenser is right, it's not clogged, the AC fans are working right, and all that. Then from there, it will go either to an orifice tube or an expansion valve, depending on the setup you have on your car. Now, once it passes, if it's an orifice tube, sometimes it's outside and you can touch just after the orifice tube, the tubing. On this car, I can't show you, plus this car has an expansion valve inside of the dash. Now, when you touch it, right after the orifice tube, it should be really cool to the touch because right after the orifice tube, the refrigerant expands, goes from liquid to gas, and therefore everything is cool after that, and it goes to the evaporator, and so on and so forth. So if you touch it and it's cool, that means the orifice tube is working right, it's doing its job. But then after that, it goes to the low pressure side. The low pressure side is going to be this thicker or bigger line that's going to be coming out of your dash. That's right after your evaporator. Now, if you touch that right after it comes out of the dash, I can't show you on this car because it's buried under there, under those things down there. And then if you touch it, and if it's cool, then again, if you have an expansion valve, especially since you can't check those on the high pressure side, then that means the evaporator is working right and everything is good on that side as well. And you just, this is basically, that gives you an idea. Usually, if you have a bad AC compressor, the AC compressor clutch engages because there's enough pressure in the system, but it's just, it's broken all inside. It's not compressing the refrigerant. And therefore, you're not going to have a hot line, high pressure line coming out of your AC compressor. So yeah, minus having electrical issues with your AC system, which is not very common, the things in this video should help you diagnose 90+% of problems with your AC system. Now, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell notification, also hit that thumbs up button. And if you want to see more like it, check out these videos on the screen. Also, the videos in the suggestion box by Ratchets and Wrenches will work as well. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.